Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly Stevens, and this is Carly Stevens Books for all things writing, publishing, and indie author life. And I am just so pleased to have today's guest with us. Cat Coluccio is an author and the host of the Rocking Midlife podcast and community, and a champion of midlife women. A qualified educator, personal trainer, and life coach, Kat is passionate about seeing women empowered to stop procrastinating, identify their values and goals, take intentional action, and build purposeful lives and businesses, creating a legacy for their families and communities. At home, speaking on both live or virtual stages, Kat has been a featured guest on numerous international podcasts and summits, as well as in national print publications, television, and radio shows. A transplanted Australian, Kat resides in New Zealand with her husband, children, and grandson, along with far too many cats and sheep. She's partial to a glass of Prosecco, who isn't, and a laugh with friends, good chocolate, great books, and lives by her personal philosophy: it's never too late to have a new beginning in life. So thank you so much for being here, Kat.
Oh, thank you for having me, Carly. I'm so excited to finally connect with you and chat. You're amazing.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, so for people who don't know, which I guess is pretty much everybody out there, Kat and I met last year at the 20 Books conference in Vegas, and we just got along like a house on fire. And so I've
We
been
did.
looking for an excuse to, reconnect and really pick Kat's brain. And so today we're going to talk about why it's never too late to write a book. I'm sure you hear this all the time, and we'll get into it here in a second. But I have people come up to me all the time who say, "Oh yeah, I've always wanted to write a book," or I started something, and maybe they're a lot of them are older, they have different careers and things, and they just sound sort of sad, like it's never going to happen, and that
Yeah.
doesn't need to be the case. But before we dive into all of that, how did you first get into writing? I can see a bunch of your books back there.
Yeah. I'm one of those people who basically didn't get to writing my books either until I was in my early 50s, late 40s, early 50s. And yeah, it's crazy, really, because when I look back at school, English was actually one of my best subjects, and English literature. And then I minored in English literature when I did my studies, when I did my degree. And I've always loved writing, yet I never actually gave myself the time
Mm,
or the space to do it, because it's one of those things that you only do if you think that you're really gifted, right? And I think that's one of the lies that we tell ourselves, to not actually get started. So
mm.
for me, it was a natural progression from my own midlife reinvention, my first one, where I went back to school after taking time out to homeschool my own kids when they were teenagers. And then I started working in a gym. I started training people. I went online with that training. As it developed, I started writing just about the experiences that I was having with these people. So I started a blog, and then out of that came my first book, which actually isn't in there, but it was called Girl, Get Over Yourself and Get in the Game, which was basically a message to myself and to other midlife women at the time that we need to pick up those old dreams, or we need to chase some new dreams when we hit our midlife season. And for me, that included writing that book, which then went on to writing a whole lot more books. And now here I am today, defining myself as a writer and totally out of the gym world and writing books. So, yeah, that's how it happened.
I love that. Yeah, I didn't get started quite in midlife, but writing a young adult, my first young adult book at 32 is, a little
Fantastic.
later on the scale of young adult writers. You see all the, on social media, it's all, 20 somethings getting in the game.
Yeah.
More power to them, but I I love more and more to hear about people who didn't start right away, who had a whole career, or, they reached 45 or 50 and they decided to pursue their dreams and actually made it happen and weren't held back by those negative preconceptions. Um, so yeah, that's awesome. So why did you decide to focus your books on helping women specifically? But it sounds like the lessons could apply. Um, helping
Yeah,
in midlife,
yeah.
like, what is special to you about that audience? It sounds like you have a personal connection, but could you, expand on that a bit more?
Well, if you had asked me, like, when I was in my 30s and early 40s, if you'd said to me you're going to be writing books for midlife women, I would have gone, okay, that's a little odd. Thanks for that. It was just, it's one of those things that evolved. Like I said, with my own first midlife reinvention, I went back and retrained, chose to be a personal trainer, which to this day, I have no clue why I chose that. Freaked the family right out, because the reality was I hadn't graced the door of a gym myself for the previous 10 years. My children were both elite athletes and literally traveling the world, which is why I had chosen to homeschool them for their last 6 years of high school, because their training schedule and their travel schedule was so full on. But I just knew that I wanted to do something. When my youngest was accepted into university, I call it my little quiz show that I had to face. I had 3 boxes of one. Well, who am I now? Do I go back into teaching music, which is how I'd started out in life? Do I sit and pine for the world that I'd had, homeschooling the kids, and now life would never be the same? And there was a little moment of that, because I actually loved that season. Or number 3, do I become a whole new person? So I decided to take box number 3 and go out and reinvent my life.
Mm,
And so started on that path in the gym. And as I started training people, and there were scary moments along the way, because who knew that I'd have to get fit too? Like, that never crossed my mind. So, I have lovely stories of where I would literally fell on my face, literally in front of all these young students, because I was totally unfit and had to learn myself from the ground up as what I was going to be helping other people do. But as I got going in the gym, I noticed more and more and more I was attracting people that were just like me.
mm,
And they were women in their 40s and 50s who were sort of emerging from these years of, being the mum on the ground, looking after all their kids, running kids around, doing all these things, and who are now like emerging, blinking in the sunlight, going, oh my gosh, who am I going to be now? And
mm,
I had this time to do more for myself, and that's why a lot of them were there. Like, the gym part of it was part of them rediscovering who they were. And as time went on, it became less and less about them wanting to actually learn a certain exercise. It became almost like therapy time. I'd be counting their reps, and it would be, well, how's your marriage? How are your kids this week? How are
mm,
you? And it was more and more of these midlife women that were looking for more. So when my time in the gym ended, sort of came to an end, and a lot of that was due to, because I've lived with chronic pain for many, many years, and it became unbearable for me to stay in that position, because
mm.
I'd already taken things online and had started writing this blog and encouraging them in a group. It became a natural progression to start writing for that demographic, because they were the people I was attracting. So that's where it all sort of started.
I love that. So since you speak to midlife women, you've really dedicated in a lot of ways this phase of your life to that group. What are some common misconceptions that you run into from people who are interested in starting a creative career
Yeah,
later in life?
so many, so many. Sorry if I just jumped in there.
Oh no,
Number
please
one,
go ahead.
look, I think a lot of these misconceptions you would have dealt with yourself. Younger women will also be having to deal through some of them, but a big one is, I'm not good enough.
Hmm,
Why would I try a new creative, pursuing something creative when I know I'm not talented enough? And I think that's a lie so many of us tell ourselves at any stage. I remember this because, I originally started out as a musician. I trained at the Conservatorium of Music in Australia. That's where my degree was from.
hmm,
And you battled it all the time, because there were always going to be people that are better than you.
hmm,
But one thing I learned myself, and that I've had to encourage these other women along the way, is just because there's other people better than you doesn't mean that your voice doesn't still matter.
hmm,
And there is room for your voice, be it you expressing it through writing or through being a musician or singing or doing your crafts or whatever it is that you do creatively. But if you can accept that, no, you're not the best in the world, but that's okay.
Mm.
Then you'll be brave enough to just get on it and start pursuing it. And I'm sure that's something you've had to deal with yourself, wouldn't you, Carly, with your own writing and what you do?
I mean, yes, I have other hangups that
Yeah.
are greater, I think, because I know that I can improve on what I am doing, and I think my work
Yes.
stands up to, others. So I don't feel super self-conscious with the writing part of things. The
Yeah.
business side of things, I feel real self-conscious about at times,
Yes.
instead. So,
And that's the other
that's my
side of it, I
honest
think,
answer.
too. Yeah, and but you're right, because that's another area that women are scared about. Well, but I don't have, if I'm not good enough, if one of the things I work them through, which is exactly, sorry, walk them through, which is exactly what you said, which is teaching them to realize that they're actually capable of upskilling, of going and finding the answers, of learning how to do things. So you nailed one of the reasons why you can get through that little lie. But the business side is another one that they're fearful of. Well, I don't have the luxury of heaps of money laying around to support me to go and throw everything away and be a writer or pursue my whatever it is that I want to do. But when they realize too that that's also a skill that they can learn, and that they can learn how to monetize things, if that is something that's been holding them back, or if it's something that they just want to pursue for the fulfillment of it, it's something they can still do. But definitely that's a big one. I'm not good enough, so therefore why should I even bother going down that track? Another one that a lot of them struggle with is that age thing. Well, I've left it too late.
Mm,
And look at all these incredible 23-year-olds coming through who are so much more savvy online, using technology than I. And that's another one that, there are so many examples out there of people who started later in life for whatever reason. And, Colonel Sanders is an obvious one. He didn't, launch Kentucky Fried. I think he was like 60 pushing 70 when that finally took off.
mm,
Vera Wang didn't, start her incredible bridal boutique until she was in her 40s. Martha Stewart just seems to hit her stride more and more and more as she ages. And she didn't really kick off with her business until she was 50. There are actually countless examples of women and men too who didn't hit their stride until they're in their 40s or 50s or beyond.
mm,
And the age, that construct of you've left it too late, really doesn't apply anymore, because we actually have more wisdom, more insight that comes with age, that comes with having, spent spent those years beforehand, in different fields. That's something that we can bring to our writing or to our craft, whatever it is, that younger people don't have. So, yeah, they may be more tech savvy. They may have the ability to research, they may be quicker at that than we are, but we also have things that they don't yet have, and that is wisdom and experience that comes with having spent those years out and about. That's something you can't shortcut. So there are a couple of the things that I find women really deal with.
mm. I love that. I say pretty often, one of the things that I love about writing or that I love about books is that it'll wait for you. It's not like being an elite
Yes.
athlete where you can age out of really being able to reach a certain level. It's something that you can come to whenever you're ready to come to it, and you know it'll be there for you.
Yes, that's the perfect analogy. Yes, you're right. Because it's not defined by your actual physical state. It's something that you can do, whether you're 100 or whether are in your early 20s. And I think that's a really great analogy actually for it. Well done, you. I'm going to use that one.
So you've already kind of touched on it, but what is some advice that you would give to somebody who feels like I've always wanted to write a book, but I have no idea where to start. People are talking about platforms and writing craft, and if you're starting from zero in your, late 40s, say, what advice would you give that person?
Gosh, so much. Where to start? Where to start? All right. I think first of all is just do a brain dump, because
Mm,
half of the problem is that we live so much in our heads that we overwhelm ourselves and then we get stuck because we've just got so much going on. And the best thing you can do, and this is something in life in general, in fact, I almost do one every week because I tend to process so much internally, and that is just do an absolute brain dump. If time and money weren't issues at all, what would you write about? And just put it all out. You may find that, oh, I want to do kids' books and I want to do young adults, but I love romance, and get it all out. And then you can start narrowing it down. Well, actually, what is it? What would be the top genre out of all of those that I'm really the most passionate about? And then start refining it from that. Or it may well be that you want to start with something with the audience in mind, first of all. So rather than something that you love, it might be, well, actually, what do I want my book to be about? Do I want it to be something that's going to entertain 5-year-olds? Do I want it to be something that is going to really move teenagers? Or do I want it to be a bit of a legacy piece for my own family, where I'm actually passing on family memories or family history? So that's another way you can take, and that particularly works for nonfiction books, where you really start with your audience in mind. Who's the audience that I'm writing to, and what is their problem that I want my book to solve? So that's often the beginnings for a nonfiction book. So my books, some of them are to overcome procrastination, to help your productivity. One of them is called Your Midlife Side Hustle. So it's giving you a definite 5 different options you can look at if you wanted to start an online side hustle. It's pretty self-explanatory. One is about decluttering. And so it's got obvious problems, obvious audiences in mind, and then the book is written to answer that problem. So they're my starting positions that I would suggest for the person who's like, where do I start? Start with what's in your head, what do you love, what's an audience, and what's the problem that you want to solve. And then you get the little overlap amongst those, and you should be able to find a bit of a starting point there.
So just finalizing what the project is. So I kind of want to take this a bit further, because there are so many parts to being a writer. Okay, so let's say
Yes, so
we have
many.
we have a hypothetical person who is 49, who wants to
Mm-hmm.
write a sci-fi book. Let's say
Mm-hmm.
they've just been
Yep.
mulling over this sci-fi concept
Secret,
for
tricky all their life. Yep.
right, for years and years and years, but they've never actually like sat down and written anything since a school assignment when they were 14. Um,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so for this person who has their concept, but kind of lacks that practice or that direction, or that understanding of like an author business, what would be the next just a doable step for that person? Because I could see that being
Yeah.
prohibitively intimidating.
Yes, I think it would be. I would say start on Amazon, get to know your genre. So start reading, start looking. What are the themes of the books that are in the bestseller rank? What is kind of like the average size of a best-selling book? So because there's short reads, and I've started to pen names on the side this year, fiction pen names, and I'm just doing the short reads category. So each book is only about 49 to 50, 54 pages long. Start looking at all those sort of questions. Just get really practical about it and spend a bit of time just researching. What books do you really like? What books are really selling in that genre? Because you can have sci-fi with romance, or you could have sci-fi and it's a murder mystery. You can add all these different aspects to just sci-fi. There's so many different variations. So I would get really specific with researching about which way you want to go and which particular genre, and then have a look at their reviews. What are people saying? Is there a gap that people think is being missed? Like they're saying, hey, I really love this, but I really wish you had done or created a more definite world. I'm sort of making it up because it's not a genre I'm that familiar with. You know what I mean? Like, have a look at what the reviews are saying. Is there anything that they really, really love? Is there anything that they really think is missing? Because they're little tips that you can then apply to what it is that you want to write. Because again, if you're wanting this to be a business, you need to be considering, you do need to think about your audience. And I know a sci-fi audience, that those people have pretty definite things that they look for in books, that they want to see in a story. So it's particularly pertinent that you do the research to know what those things are. My next step personally, if you're an absolute beginner, would be go find some sci-fi authors that are speaking. They might have podcasts.
Mm.
I would be getting on their newsletters. I would be getting in their world. How do they operate? What do they look to? What do they recommend with the craft of writing for that genre? And then you might want to invest in a small course or just go to Udemy or have a look around. Um, I would certainly be looking into the craft and how to structure a book personally, to fit that genre. I'd be doing some research about that as well and a little bit of upskilling. And then once you've got all those things in place and you're nailing it down a bit more, I would start playing with AI, get onto Chat GPT, throw in different names and titles and see what comes back there. Using AI could be really helpful in you structuring your book, to helping you outline your book. I still think that there needs to be the human writer in there, but it can be really helpful getting you started in structuring the outline of where you want to take your book. So that would be my process. Would you do something similar yourself, Carly?
I did not that exact path, but something kind of similar when I decided that I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to really pursue being an author. I was on YouTube all the time. I was listening to podcasts
Yes,
all the time. I was really trying to learn from
same.
people who had gone down that road, both in the business and the craft side. So I listened to things like the self-publishing show,
Mm-hmm.
the Creative Pen podcast. There were some YouTubers that were good for craft type things. So that was my first step. And while I was doing all of that research and taking in all that information, I was drafting my what became my first book. And then as I continued to learn, I had to overhaul quite a bit once I got to the end. But I found it was my willingness to learn and change a lot about that first story
Yes.
that was the difference between, thinking it'd be cool to write a book and becoming an author of lots of things, just having that openness to get better. So yeah, I would totally agree with what you said. I did a variation on your advice.
Yeah, yeah. And I love what you just said. You have the openness then to take that information, to take those things on board and pull apart your work. So I think learning not to be precious about your baby is a huge part of it too, especially if you do want to learn and grow. If you get too precious about what you've written, you're not necessarily going to go far as an author because you've got to be prepared to learn and to evolve and to change and to chop things out. And I think that's a huge part of it too.
Yeah, yeah, I think especially at the beginning, just
Mm-hmm.
overcoming that hurdle of not being
Yeah,
as precious about your work is huge. And then as time goes on, you can kind of decide what you're willing to kind of stand up for and say, no, this is my style, and maybe it's not
yeah,
your thing. Uh,
exactly, exactly.
but at the beginning, it's harder to distinguish um, that difference. Yeah. So, um, it is a difficult but worthwhile road to
Oh, so
become
worthwhile.
to become an author, at whatever age. But there are a lot of pitfalls as well, especially that new writers tend to fall into, or new creatives. So, are there any pitfalls that you would advise people to look out for as they're
Yeah.
navigating this for the first time?
If something's too cheap, like if you're using someone off Fiverr to do a cover, like maybe look a little bit harder. I think that's a big one. And be wary, there's a million writing coaches out there.
Mm,
Be really, do your due diligence before you put money down. I'm someone who's been burnt by programs and courses and everything over the years. I've wasted
mm,
so much money and I've learned the hard way. So learn from my mistakes, to just do your due diligence. You'll be amazed at how much information is available for you before you actually have to spend more money, for coaches. But that said, if you hit the point though where you really want to go further and you want to get more professional, I do think it's worthwhile investing into a writing coach or somebody to walk through you at certain
mm.
stages or a certain course. But like I said, just be diligent about it. So I think they're the money things, the big pitfall. And I remember someone said something to me years ago. It's not quite so true for independently published, that they used to say something along the lines of, a publisher, the money goes from the publisher to the writer, not the other way around. Just be wary there are scams out there, and they're usually in all the Facebook groups that are set up where a lot of young authors or fledgling authors will gather to, to try and get camaraderie and to learn. And there'll be people offering you this, that, and everything. Hey, I'm this amazing literary agent. If you just pay me, $3,000, I'm going to promote your book because I've seen a snippet and yep, it's the best book ever. And I'm going to promote you here, there, and everywhere. Just be really, really aware that there are scammers preying on young writers like they do for every other business on there. So it's just that little bit of being wise.
Yeah, I hate that that's the reality, but you ask almost any writer who's been around for a while and they've had it happen to them, or they've almost had
Yeah.
it happen to them, or they know somebody. So yeah, I would definitely echo that. If somebody says, "Oh, it's only $2,000 and we'll publish your book and do all the work," that's
Yeah.
not how this
That's
not
not
how this
true.
is meant to
Yeah.
work.
Run,
Uh,
run.
yeah, right. That's a huge waving red flag. Yeah. So since you're clearly a very encouraging person. Let's go in the opposite direction, because yes, there are pitfalls, yes, there are difficulties, yes, sometimes you
Yeah.
need to cut things from your work that, you care about, but it is awesome to be a writer and to get to do what we
Yes.
do. So, what other words of encouragement would you give to somebody who wants to, maybe be an author, maybe just write the one book that's kind of been in them, but they feel daunted? What would you kind of leave
Well,
that
I
person
think
with?
that you kind of nailed it before when you were talking about your journey. That was the bit I meant to comment on. And you were saying how while you were learning and gathering all this information, you were writing your draft. And I think that is the key. You took action. So at the end of the day, you can do all the brain dumps, all the research, all of the groups, and just become this amazing expert on the business of writing, but you still haven't taken action, actually written your book. So I think that is huge. At some point, you need to put pen to paper. And I encourage anyone who even has the slightest little, niggle of, oh gosh, I wish I could write something, to take the time to do that and take off your inner editor while you're doing it. So don't worry about how good it is. Don't worry about, if anyone will ever read it or not. Write it for you. Get it out of your head, get it on paper or onto your computer, or how you best do it. There is nothing, and I'm sure you'll agree, there is nothing like holding a book in your hand and going, oh my gosh, I actually did this. Would you agree?
I totally agree. I still
Yeah.
get just so excited, and
Same.
I've written quite a few books now, but I mean, just thinking, I get all misty eyed just thinking about holding that first book.
Yeah.
It's a moment for sure.
It is. It really is. And like mine was just, actually, I should have brought mine over. Mine was just this tiny, tiny little thing, that get out of the game, which was just basically a little motivational thing just from my female clients at the time. But oh my gosh, look, I'm slurring my words here. I'm so excited. When I held it in my hands, it was just like, oh,
It's a dream
it
come
was just,
true.
it is. It is. And at the same time, it's super scary because it's like, oh my gosh, I'm putting my heart out here now, holding it out for the world to critique. And so you do have that fear as well. But, there comes a point where you have to weigh up the fear of not doing it compared to the fear of being judged. And at
Mhm.
some point in your life, you need to go, the fear of not doing it is going to outweigh that fear of being judged. And I think, particularly for midlife women, particularly we older women who aren't necessarily as confident as you younger ladies who've come through behind us, that's a biggie. I mean, that's been a biggie that I've had to deal with in myself all my years. When you're a performer of any description, you're putting yourself up on a stage and you're playing to thousands of people, someone's judging you. And yet I still want to play. Well, back then I still wanted to play. So at some point you need to overcome all of those fears that have been holding you from, keeping you playing small, of not actually putting action to this dream that you want to do. And then it's just a matter of just do it. Age does not stop you picking up a pen. And if it does, well, then you dictate it. We have technology now. You basically have no excuses anymore. Or you could be someone like me who had to give up work in a traditional environment because of pain and an illness that I live with now. I mean, if I was in America, I guess I'd be labeled, disabled and on a disability pension, but there's no need to because I can write. So writing is something you can do at any age, at any, regardless of if you're fully able-bodied or if you're really incapacitated. You can still reach the world, you can still interact with the world through writing. So if it's even the slightest dream in your heart, I want to encourage you to do it, especially when you go back to what I said earlier in our conversation, because your voice matters. And there's someone out there that needs to hear your wisdom, your heart, what you have to share through your storytelling. So I think it's just a matter of don't be scared. Don't look at what everyone else is doing as far as you're not as talented. It's just take action and do it.
Oh my goodness. You're just speaking my language so much. I get so moved by this topic, and I think it's so important. And I'm glad that you
Yes.
added that part about the fear of being judged. It's like, yes, that is
Yes.
just the reality of putting a story out there. But I would just add, one more thing that I've found it crucial to surround myself with people who support me either in
Mm.
person or
Yes.
virtually. There's a lot of negativity out there, whether that's with people judging your work partially or whatever. I've gotten 1-star reviews. I'm sure you probably have.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and
I know,
and you
and you
need
immediately think, I want to talk it over with them. What's the problem here? But you can't. You've just
right.
got to, you got to
It's
roll with it.
yeah. It's just like, if you are successful enough, then that's going to happen because it'll get past your,
You're going to get even
friends and
more if
family
you're
and on to
successful.
the mean
Yeah.
people. But yeah, I would just say, come back to, people like Kat and hopefully people like me who can,
Yes. Like you.
encourage you and not say that your work is perfect. Everybody can improve. Everybody can learn from critiques and things like that. But it's just so important to have those really positive voices and listen to the good reviews and
Hmm.
don't let that fear of a few people judging you harshly stop you from getting your stuff out there. So that was wonderful. Where can people find more of you and your work online if they want to seek it out?
Well, the easy one is just go to catcoluccio.com, which is my name, which I'm sure you'll have spelt underneath. One L,
I
two
will. All
C's,
the links
folks.
will be down there.
And you can find links to everything there. The Rocky Midlife podcast, you can find on all podcast platforms. It's a general podcast around everything midlife. So we talk everything from menopause to sex to following your dream to whatever. And interestingly, I did interview a lady who helped me with my initial couple of books. And she's on there too. So there's a mixture of people in there. And there's lots of stories of people who have followed their passions at midlife that I hope will encourage, whether they're writers or not, you'll still get courage out of their stories.
Mm. Well, once again, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. It was
Oh, thank
amazing
you.
to reconnect and I hope that this encourages somebody out there who has been hanging on to this dream and doesn't maybe feel equipped or young enough or whatever it is that's holding you back and I hope
Yeah.
this encourages you to go for it if that's what you really want. All right. Well,
Thank you so much, Carly.
if you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and I guess I'll see you next time.